There we go. All right. So welcome everybody again. This is the Bytespeed webinar. Essentially hardware, facility building, do's, don'ts, and DIYs for esports. My name is Josh Knutson, and I am the Esports and Virtual Reality Solutions Director for Bytespeed. I've been here for about 3 years. It'll be actually 3 years here on May 1st. So time's flown by. In a previous life, I was a esports coach and director at the University of Jamestown over in North Dakota. It's kind of where I got my start in esports back in 2016. Was a brand new program at the time. There were not a ton of college programs back, 6 years ago. It was kind of the very start of the collegiate boom as we know it, and programs kind of starting and building out really like varsity style athletic programs for esports. So I did that for 3 years. And then, like I said, I've been at Bytespeed now for 3 years as well. The other thing that I'd like to mention is that I'm a NACAD advisory board member. NACAD is the National Association of Esports Coaches and Directors. I know that's an acronym and it's a mouthful, but I'm an advisory board member. I've been involved since the very beginning. For those of you who are brand new esports coaches, I would highly recommend joining NACAD. It's an awesome group of professionals like yourselves at the high school and the college level, some industry members, all kind of creating content and sharing it for professional development, so that new esports coaches can get the value that they need and to learn kind of the ropes on how to do things from those of us who have been doing it for a while. So just a small little plug for NACAD there. My contact info is on the screen. Please feel free to reach out. If we don't get to your question today, send me an email, shoot me a text, give me a call, whatever works for you. I live on Twitter as well, so feel free to DM me there. But we definitely want to make sure that we answer all of your questions either today in the webinar or, like I said, after the fact. So why are we here today? Everybody kind of, knows what an esports facility, looks like, right? We've got the LEDs all over the place, the blacked out room, school logos all over the place. This is like the stereotypical esports facility, or it was, 6 years ago when the University of Jamestown started this program and started our team. So this is our facility, and we'll have a picture with the lights on later. But a lot of schools, when they get started with esports, whether it's in the K-12 world or in the college world, oftentimes there's a lot of questions on like, well, how do we do this? What is the roadmap that we need to follow on going from an empty room to having a team up and running and practicing and competing? So there's 4 really big questions on that roadmap towards getting your team off the ground. And the first one, before we even talk about hardware, before we talk about anything else, we need to have a why. The schools, the reasons for adding esports are all over the place. We'll talk about some of the real common ones here in a second, but the successful programs, those that have been operating for a couple of years, that have kept their student engagement high, they've had a purpose behind what they're doing. They've had a reason to why they built out an esports program in the first place. So you're due for question why, and if the slide doesn't give it away, there will be a do, a don't, and a DIY for every single one of these questions. The do is to have a purpose on why you are building out your team. The don't is rush into building out your program without having that strategic goal in place. Oftentimes programs who don't have a very clear-cut goal or vision, for whatever reason, it could be, they're getting pressure to start a program because the school in their district has one, and they need to follow suit. Or it could be a college athletic conference where a couple of schools start programs and, the university feels like they're a little behind the 8 ball. So they rush into it without having this clear defined goal. Those programs oftentimes struggle. especially in year 2 and year 3. So to avoid that, definitely collaborate with your administration, your coaches, the teachers that are going to be involved, and come up with your why. And like I said, there's a number of different reasons for that why, and it's going to be unique to you, unique to your school. But here are some of the common ones, right? So student engagement at the top of the list, by far the most common reason why either a high school, a middle school, a college wants to start an esports program. It is for that student engagement piece, right? It is for getting more students involved in your campus community, making sure that they have a reason that they're really engaged in their education. For a really long time, we've had athletes on this side who are playing basketball and football and baseball and soccer and softball, and the list goes on and on. And on the other side, you've got your fine arts students who are doing band and choir and theater and those great things. But esports kind of fills the gap between the middle. Oftentimes, you're going to pull students from those two existing groups. But a lot of esports programs end up with, students who have never participated in extracurriculars before. They've never been a part of a team before, never done something outside of just, showing up to school and then going home. So esports provides expanded opportunities for those students, not only the competitive, but also, in broadcasting, in media production, in business, management. There's a long list of kind of tie-ins for esports and the different levels of participation. But a lot of times these students have never had that opportunity before. So that engagement piece, like I said, is definitely number one. Retention and recruitment, those kind of go hand in hand. This is definitely more prevalent at the college level. So University of Jamestown, when I started, we had the goal of building an esports program as a recruitment tool, as a way to get new students to our campus, to our school. Jamestown's a small NAIA private college in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota, about 1,000 undergrad students, and having a team of 30, 40, 50 esports participants was a really cool thing that we could maybe build towards. And that was ultimately why, we decided to start the program in 2016. And that's common across a lot of institutions. The retention piece definitely in recent years has been even more important. Keeping those students that come to your school, keeping them engaged, keeping them as students without having them transfer or drop out, making sure that they, show up as a freshman on your campus and end up graduating after 4 years. At the high school level, you could kind of make a case for these as reasons. If you're dealing with like something like open enrollment or a really unique kind of specialized school where districts kind of feed into your platform because you have a specific learning model or something like that. I think of like a STEM high school that's specific to, a city where other districts, if they have students that are interested in those programs, they end up going to this school because of the opportunities there. And then social and emotional growth, definitely this is like something that we've seen from traditional athletics for years, right? Being a part of a program, being a part of a team teaches you how to think critically, work together with others, communicate, the list goes on and on and on. And the growth is not mutually exclusive to basketball. You're going to see those things happen with your esports students because they're a part of this team. So as a recap, make sure that before you even dive into the weeds on facilities and hardware and all the things that go into building out your physical space, make sure you have that key reason why, because like I said, those programs that don't have a clearly defined goal often struggle. They might have that honeymoon period where the first 6 months are great. You've got a ton of students coming in the door. They're all participating. But if there's not really like a clear goal to why you're there, that attendance might drop off, or you might not be hitting the metrics that, you originally set out to. So have a goal before you get started. The second question is where. Bytespeed, we work with schools and colleges across the country in all 50 states. I've seen esports facilities be put in every place you can think of. From classrooms that are getting renovated to be solely esports facilities, computer labs that are just having their hardware refreshed to kind of higher end machines, student media centers, libraries, cafeterias, even where it's set up and tear down at the end of every day, everywhere under the sun. And really, especially when we talk about the rest of this presentation and kind of even in the why as well, just because your answer is, hey, media center in the library where we set up and tear down, doesn't mean that the school down the road or in your state, in your conference has to do the exact same thing. We all have different needs in schools, no matter what level you're at. And being able to say, this is right for our students and our situation, that's the important thing. So there's not like a copy and paste answer for any of this. There's some kind of key benchmarks that you want to hit, but find the right facility, find the right space for your school and your students. And to do that, you want to collaborate with IT early. There are a couple of things, especially on that side of the house, that are going to be really important to your success in the long term. And we'll talk about, physical needs of a space in a second, but the IT staff, the network admin, they're going to be your best friends. Being able to rely on them and collaborate with them early, it will definitely save you headaches down the road. Like I said, don't overlook non-conventional spaces like, that pot of tables in the cafeteria where we can put laptops up, or, the machine shop that's getting a wall put up and divided into two separate buildings. The number of spaces that will fit your needs is going to be different for everybody. And sometimes it's the room that's, just a storage room right now, but could be transformed into something awesome with a little bit of elbow grease. You can find some pretty cool spaces if you open it up to just more than like, oh, we don't have a computer lab. And something that you can do as a DIY is like sketch rough draft renderings out for proposed spaces, so that when you talk to vendors, when you talk to administration, you have an idea of kind of the direction you want to go and where, if we're looking at one physical space, what would we put in there, or where would we be able to move things around to make that space work? Doing some of that planning beforehand, even when you're evaluating multiple spaces, is going to be a really good thing for you. So what are the physical needs of a space? What do we need to look at when we're evaluating, a room to move into? At the top of the list, square footage. It's kind of like the forehead bonk. How much can we actually fit in this facility? The typical esports desk, is about 4 feet wide and about 4 feet deep, if you count like the chair plus the desk. So you want to kind of plan for that amount of space in the room that you're moving into. How many desks can we have in this room? How many consoles, PCs, whatever it might be? How many students can be in here? What is my capacity? How am I going to have to plan for multiple practices or this large number of students coming in? Making sure that we have a room that can accommodate our needs. Accessibility is a big thing. You're all educators, so I don't have to harp on this too much. But esports provides opportunities for students who, have not maybe participated in athletics or other extracurriculars before because of a disability. And esports kind of opens the door for those students in some cases. One of my favorite stories is Bytespeed did a scholarship competition a couple of years ago where we gave away some laptops to students. And one of the coolest examples of this accessibility conversation was there was a student from out east. I think it was like kind of the New Hampshire area, kind of up in the Northeast, who wrote us back and said, this is the first time I've been a part of a sport before. I'm in a wheelchair. And I've never been able to do things before because of my disability. But, because esports is there, I have that competitive outlet to where I can, participate, be a part of the team, and practice at the same level as my teammates who don't have that disability. So making sure that your space is accessible to those students, and making sure that they can actually get in and use that space and be a part of your community. That's a huge thing. And definitely one of my favorite stories from a couple of years ago. Power and internet, these might seem like kind of like, well, duh, we have to put computers in a space, we need power and internet. But you need to make sure that, depending on the size of the fleet that you put in that room, that the infrastructure that's already there can handle it. So not overloading and plugging in, 12 computers into one outlet with a power strip. Making sure you have the circuits that can handle it. Computers nowadays are really power efficient, but you want to work with IT and facilities to make sure that your plan for the space is actually physically doable. Internet we'll talk about more in depth in a while, but do everything you can to have a wired internet connection over Ethernet. Please do not play on Wi-Fi. We'll give you kind of some more reasons why for that, like I said, later. But just for the stability's sake and for the student experience sake, a wired connection is going to be almost a must-have. I totally get that that's not an opportunity for everybody, but if you have the ability to run a drop or make sure that the number of machines that you're getting into this room, that we are able to connect over Ethernet. HVAC and lighting, these are kind of like things that you might not think are important, but as a team that ran a program in a room with no working AC in the first year, oh boy, does it make a difference. Most computers nowadays don't throw a ton of heat. Like I said, they're pretty power efficient. It's not like you're running, giant space heaters like in the years ago, but in combination with let's say we have 15 computers in a room with 15 bodies and other people moving around and other stuff, you want to be comfortable and you want to make sure that you're not getting to the extreme ranges of hot or cold, and just kind of double checking and making sure that the air and heat work in your room to just kind of keep things at, what you would expect a traditional computer lab to be at. That's going to be a big plus for you and definitely something to not overlook when you're starting out your program or kind of moving into a new facility. And then the last one, lighting, if we go back to, the dark LED lit room of my Jamestown facility, this used to be all the rage, like, the dim lit room, we're in there, we're playing esports. This is the look and the environment that we want. I'm less and less of a fan of that nowadays. I don't know if it's just me learning over time and working with more schools, but I'm more of a fan now of the brighter spaces. We're showing up to do a job. A lot of times, the students that are practicing, especially if you're talking like a collegiate varsity program, we're there to get better so that we can, compete at the highest level possible. We're not, doing the stereotypical gamer thing in the basement, hid away from the rest of the world. We're there to practice and learn and grow. And that goes for all levels. Your goals might be different competitively, but the environment that you want to participate in should match your goals. So not necessarily the high fluorescent lighting that's on the screen here, but maybe something that's like a dimmable switch where you can have warm, soft lighting, still enough light to where we're not straining our eyes in the dark. But not like harsh lighting where we're going to have glare on monitors or it's going to be uncomfortable for somebody to sit there for a couple hours with a bright light, above them and in front of their face. And then last but not least, as far as the needs of a space, I want to talk a little bit about multi-purpose rooms. At the K-12 level, especially, there are many schools that will use academic resources to purchase gear for esports. And how they do that is kind of, we're familiar with programs like Project Lead the Way. Maybe it's an engineering lab or an Adobe lab where we're doing some high-end software processes where we need some computers that have the hardware to run, stuff that we're doing in the classroom during the day. And we might have wrote a grant for this academic program to get this hardware, and then from 8 in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon we're using it in class, but then at 3 o'clock it's the esports room. That hardware has the capability to play the games that our team is playing. So making sure that if you're set up like that, if there's classes that are using the room outside of your practice time, what are their needs? Is it a space that everybody can use and accomplish what they've set out to do? So like I said, this is especially prevalent at the K-12 level with, a number of different programs, but making sure that, if it's configurable and it works for those school academic programs, that it also is fulfilling the needs of your esports team. So kind of making the best use of your space for as many students as possible. Next question is, we're finally to the what. We've got a space, we've got our reason, our why of why we're starting this esports program, and now we're on to what do we actually need to put in the facility. And there's some really practical do's and don'ts for this, and that definitely go and visit and consult with other schools in your area. Like I said before, you don't have to copy and paste what they did to your school because your needs are different, your students are different, your school is different. But steal the best ideas from your neighbors and talk and brainstorm through what they did, kind of what hurdles they overcame. Maybe it's, what vendors did they use, or what setup did they have for access, or whatever it might be. But talk to the schools close by you that have programs up and running and learn from them. The esports community, especially in K-12 and in college, is extremely motivated to growing the sport. And so I think you'll find where it's a lot different than traditional athletics, where, if you go and talk to a football coach who's been around for, 20, 30 years, they're not going to want to spill their secrets to you. They're not going to want to give you, that special sauce on how they run their program because, that would give their competitive edge away. Esports is a little different. We all kind of want more schools and more students to participate. So I think you'll find the community really willing to say, this is what we did. Here you go. Take what we did, learn from it, make sure you don't trip up over, I don't know, security or something like that. Learn from the schools who have done it before you, because chances are they're going to want to share. The don't for this one is don't overspend. We're going to have a really good conversation about needs versus wants in a second. And there is a cost to starting an esports program. I'm not going to lie to you about that. However, you can do this for a lot less than some of the consulting companies out there say you need to. And there's ways that we can do that creatively and just kind of being an informed customer that we'll talk about, but please don't overspend on your esports team. And then the DIY is you can get creative with some of those things that, aren't necessarily big spenders, but can get more students involved and will really kind of tie out and round out your space. So let's talk about that needs versus wants again. I want you to be very mindful of your budget, your space available, and what do we already have at the school, at the college that we can use. I like to kind of use the example of a Ferrari is really cool, but does a Toyota Camry get you from point A to B safely, securely, and it's going to last forever? Absolutely. So kind of keep that analogy, keep this needs versus wants thing in the back of your brain, especially as you're starting out. Now, there is a kind of a set of priorities and a list of equipment that you will need, either existing or to go and purchase. And it starts with infrastructure, and it's go all the way down to what's hanging on the walls. So let's kind of walk through them. And I'm going to preface this by saying I'm by no means a network admin. I'm not an engineer. This is the 10,000 million foot view on infrastructure. However, there are a couple of things that I learned from starting a program that we can kind of apply to just about everybody's situation. And the first thing is, what does your connection look like? You do not need to go overboard on internet to get your feet off the ground and get started. When I launched the program in Jamestown, we had a facility that was on its own separate network, and that's kind of bullet point 2 here. But it was a separate VLAN, a separate network from the rest of campus, which helps tremendously. But that connection speed for those 15 computers was only 500 meg. You know, it wasn't this massive, gigantic fiber pipe that we had access to. You know, we had enough to get going, and a lot of schools are also in the same boat. You might think that, you know, oh my gosh, there's no way we have enough, we have enough bandwidth to support this. But the cool thing to remember is that in the K-12 world, you know, yes, you might have hundreds of Chromebooks walking around the school during the day, and, you know, you have your business office open, and, you know, everybody's got 12 million devices, and there's phones walking around that are connected to Wi-Fi. And you might be stretched thin from like 8 to 3, like, you know, during the day. But esports typically will happen after school, and all those devices that are walking around and accessing the internet during the day typically are either gone or shut down at the time where esports will need, you know, access to the internet. So chances are your existing infrastructure is going to get you off the ground, no problem. Again, having things separated out traffic-wise is really nice. To be able to say, okay, my firewall is going to be different for the machines on, you know, this separate connection, and because that's going to be a very important thing to address right away. Is that firewall, and is the security on those machines? You know, just having internet access isn't far enough in the conversation of like, do we have access to actually play the games? That's why working with your network administrators from day one is going to be like the best decision that you can make. Chances are your firewall, whether you're a college or a high school, your firewall probably is going to block Steam or the Blizzard launcher or Origin or the, you know, the list of software goes on and on and on. Chances are those are blocked by your standard firewall. So you're going to need to go in, open up ports, allow access for those machines that are on, you know, maybe it's the esports VLAN, or it's these 15 computers that are, you know, really hyper focused into, okay, esports access at 3 o'clock every day. The way that schools handle firewalls is all over. You know, there's not a right or a wrong answer that I can tell you right now. It's like, this is how you do it. Because your staff is going to have a level of comfortability that, you know, maybe the other schools might not. So, you know, talk to your network administrators right away, talk about firewall, talk about access, and make sure that, you know, however many machines in this lab or in the space that you're going to set up and tear down, make sure that, you know, they're set up for success and actually have access to the games. Wired over Wi-Fi, we touched on this briefly before, but do everything you can to have a wired connection. It's going to give you a more stable internet connection. It's going to perform better in the end. And you're not going to have to worry about like, oh my gosh, you know, an access point dropped and, you know, we're in the middle of a game and now we don't have internet access because the closest AP is, you know, 6 doors down or something like that. You want to make sure that you can plug into an Ethernet connection. It's going to be just a better experience overall for you managing that network and for being, you know, the guy in charge, all the way down to your students actually playing the games. The one thing infrastructure wise that you're going to want to pay attention to, and this is where bandwidth also comes into consideration, is for updates. the game of basketball has had relatively the same rules for 50 years, right? I mean, yes, there have been changes, but League of Legends gets an update every 2 weeks, sometimes faster than that. The rules are changing constantly for all of these titles. Doesn't matter if it's League of Legends, Overwatch, Rainbow Six Siege, Mario Kart, whatever it might be. That software is constantly being patched and updated, and you'll need to be able to download those updates before you can play the game. So when we're playing High School B at 4:00 on Friday, and we're walking into the lab and it's 3:45, and oh my gosh, I've got a 2 gig update for 15 computers. It's going to slow us down, and we might not be ready for that game. So managing your updates, managing those downloads either in off hours or doing something like a game cache server where you can kind of just download it once and then copy those files. Those are conversations, again, that you're going to want to have with IT, with your network people, to talk about the best way to handle that. And that's where that small connectivity will definitely limit you. If I go back to Jamestown, in 2016, when we started in that 500 meg connection, we could maybe update 4 machines at a time and have them download stuff and be able to update those files. Before adding a 5th one, everything just slows way down, and it chugs to where we're not making any meaningful progress, and we got to sit there for like 2 hours to update the whole fleet. So we definitely had that conversation after that first year, and we decided to bump up our connectivity to a gig, and that was more than sufficient to kind of help us out with those updates, with kind of like the day-to-day, like, oh, we've got like a small little patch here, or maybe it's a Windows update or something like that. But we definitely did upgrade the bandwidth in year 2. And it's definitely something to look at if you're struggling in that first year. Excuse me. But you should have enough connectivity right off the bat to get started, no problem. Okay, next thing is devices, computers, consoles. What are we actually putting in the lab to play the games? And we're going to talk about computers because the majority of esports still happens on computer. There is some growing console movement in different areas, but the majority of stuff still happens on a PC. So the question is, how many do we need? And that kind of comes down to a couple of different factors. Number one is, what game are you playing? There is going to be a minimum number of devices that you need to actually play the game. It is 1-to-1 as far as PC to player. So, if we're going to play Overwatch, that's still a 6-on-6 game. Overwatch 2 might fix that or change that down to 5. But right now it's still 6-on-6. League of Legends, a lot of the other team titles are 5-on-5. Rocket League is 3-on-3. So what's the minimum I need to field a roster to actually be able to play the game? So a lot of schools will take a look at that number and then double it to be able to say, okay, I have a varsity team and a JV team, or an A and a B team, and they're going to be able to scrimmage each other in practice. So, if we've got Overwatch as the title we're playing, I'm going to look at 12 computers so that I can have, my full roster playing against each other in practice. The average at the high school level, from what Bytespeed has seen over the last 3 years that I've been with the company, most high schools start between 10 and 15 computers, kind of in that range, right in line with, hey, we've got 5 League of Legends players, I need 10 computers. At the college level, Esports Foundry did a study last year, kind of their annual update. And I believe, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think the average was 15 to 25 for the average size of a facility at the college level. More titles, more practices, students that are there for different reasons, different budgets definitely plays a factor into that. So, high school average 10 to 15 machines, college 15 to 25. is just kind of the overall nationwide look at it. But really, you can get started with as little as 3 computers, and you could play Rocket League and have an awesome time and a great experience for those students. The other thing to kind of think about is, if I have 3 computers, that's great. That's awesome for those 3 students that get to sit down and play. But what if I have 50 other kids that are waiting for their turn? So your participation is going to be limited by the number of devices that you have. And if we want to make sure that we have, a bunch of students that have opportunities every day, you might want to look at doing a few more than, the bare minimum. Specs, as far as like the actual guts of the computer, we've got a couple of really good things going for us. Number one is that a lot of esports titles are optimized to run on lower end or entry level hardware. There are still some benchmarks that you want to make sure you're above, just for, a good experience actually playing the game, and especially in the competitive world. But, there used to be the old joke that you could run League of Legends on a toaster. So, we want to look at the bare minimum to actually run the game, and then do a little bit of future proofing and a little bit of kind of like, what's the gold standard here for parts. And to answer that, I've got 2 example builds here on the screen. The entry-level solution on the left is by far and large the most common spec list that Bytespeed provides to the schools that we've worked with. And it's nothing crazy, right? It's an entry mid-level processor, i5 Ryzen 5, 16 gigs of RAM, an SSD for storage, usually about 500 gigs. Depending on how many titles you're playing, if you're doing Warzone, a couple of other larger titles that take up a lot of space nowadays, 500 might be pushing it to where you have enough space. However, that's where a lot of programs will start, and you can always add storage later. Graphics cards, that 1660 Super is still the best bang for your buck graphics card on the market now. Yes, it is a little limited in what it can do. It is an entry-level card. However, it's going to play most esports titles great. You're not going to be on ultra settings. We're not going to have ray tracing on. We're not going to be doing, crazy things with our visuals. You're going to be on competition settings, most likely. However, it's going to be able to give you access to playing those games. It's going to give you the frame rate you need to get started, to get your program off the ground, especially at the high school level. And then, you're going to look at a standard heatsink and power supply. You don't have to go overboard. Liquid cooling is almost not needed ever, unless you're doing things like really overclocking your machines, or doing really high-end rendering where your CPU is running really hot. For a gaming build, a fan air standard heatsink is going to be more than fine. And then your power supply with this build, 650 watt, is still well within what you needed for headroom, as long as it's got a certified bronze, silver, gold, whatever it might be. Make sure that it's got that certification rating. On the other side of the screen, on the right side, we've got kind of a mid-tier option. We're going to bump up the processor, i7 Ryzen 7, still 16 gigs of RAM though. For gaming performance, RAM's really like, you put 16 in, and anything more than that, you're kind of getting diminishing returns for gaming performance. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule, but really 16, as long as you have that, you're going to be rock solid, and that's still like the gold standard for gaming performance. If we're going to stream, do video editing, have a bunch of stuff running in the background, maybe you want to bump that to 32 gigs. But for gaming, you really don't need more than 16. Again, SSDs for storage, and then we bump up to like a 30 series graphics card, 3060, 3070, whatever it might be. But again, standard heatsink, 650 watt power supply, and actually with a bunch of mid-level parts in there, maybe you want to jump that to a 750 or an 850 as we kind of scale the other parts of the machine. But we would still, with a 3060, we'd still, say that a 650 watt power supply is still still good, good to go. And then, this is going to be able to run those more taxing games at higher visuals and give you that really good, solid, stable performance, with a higher end machine. So peripherals, the gold standard for esports is 24 inches, 144 hertz. For a monitor, you cannot really argue that is like exactly where you need to be. There is a growing movement of 240 hertz monitors being kind of the go-to, especially at the college level. But most programs will get 144 hertz monitors, and that's really all they need. Please don't pay for a curved monitor. There's no competitive advantage to having a curved screen. You're just going to end up overpaying for it. The important things are that resolution, getting something like a millisecond response time or faster. That's going to give you the frame rate you need to be able to be competitive. And the size of the screen, 24 inches, is really all the bigger you need to go. For keyboards and mice, mechanical is where you want to be at. They're going to be more responsive, customizable, more durable than your standard, vanilla mouse and keyboard that, we use at our desktops every day. Why I shouldn't say that, because I have mechanical mice and keyboard in front of me. But these are going to be, kind of like, again, the gold standard for gaming. There's a variety of different switches that you can get for your keycaps and a lot of different kind of into the weeds stuff. But the cool thing about this is you shouldn't have to overpay for peripherals. For $60-$70, you can get really solid stuff. Keyboard, mouse, headset, even. Monitors are obviously going to be a little bit more expensive than that, but you can get really solid equipment without breaking the bank. And a lot of times I like to equate peripherals to like shoes for basketball players. It's a comfort thing. It's a personal thing. And you're going to probably have students that are going to bring their own if they have access to them, because, they have like the size mouse that fits their hand the best, or they have a keyboard with the right key switches that they really like using. So you might have those students bring their own gear. And if not, that kind of like the stuff that you provide for them, for those students who might not have their own, doesn't have to be like the $250 keyboards out there. You can get some really awesome entry-level hardware. And then headsets, real quickly, you just want something that's over the ear with a microphone. It's going to help with communication during the game, hearing the game audio, which is really important. There's some people that might think that it's like, oh, well, if they want to talk to each other, they'll just be like sitting next to each other, right? So they can just talk, across the row or to the guy next to them, and they don't need headphones. But really, game audio is so important nowadays that having a way to hear your individual perspectives audio is going to be really, really important. And then being able to talk to somebody who might be across the room over something like Discord or the in-game communication software, that's going to be a must. And then furniture is kind of like the last spot on this. And, and kind of the needs versus wants conversation. What do you already have in your facility, in your school? Can we repurpose stuff? And if not, what do we need to look for to go out and get? Gaming chairs are all the rage. The biggest thing about them is that they're adjustable and durable, and they are a little bit more comfortable to sit at for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day than your typical office chair or like a folding chair at a table or something like that. Having something that's built for the ergonomics that you're looking for is going to be important. Desks, you really just want something sturdy, lots of usable space on top. You don't need all the extra baubles and doodads that might come with the desk. I'm really just a fan of a big flat surface that I can slap a mouse pad on top of and be able to move my arm, across as I'm playing the games. And then there might be other furniture that you're looking at. There are some schools that will put in couches or flexible seating for, console gaming that might happen, or film review or stuff like that. Maybe it's a cart that you want your consoles in, or a laptop cart or something like that for that setup and tear down scenario. What other things are you going to need to make your space work and fit your needs? And then decor and aesthetic, again, this is something really, really simple and oftentimes overlooked, but it really goes a long way to tying a space together. Don't be afraid to get creative with those cost-effective options. Doing things either, really DIY, actual DIY, or going out and getting like the $5, LED strip from the hardware store to add some accent lighting behind a TV or behind a desk or something like that. What lighting and branding can we put up that really ties in the space to look like it's a facility that your school is taking seriously? You walk into some football stadiums and some basketball courts and things like that, and you see logos on the walls and championship banners and branding, and there's an intentionality to building out those traditional athletic spaces. The same should apply for your esports space. And getting artwork from your art students at your school is a cool way to get more students involved and excited about your program. This is a thing that you can DIY a ton. And then last but not least, and I know we're kind of coming up on the hour here in about 12 minutes, so I want to kind of breeze through the last one. But it is important, is how. You might have, sat through here and said, Josh, this has been great, but we've talked about a lot of expensive stuff, and I have a budget that's like the size of a quarter. How do I pay for all this stuff? How do I get it into our school? There are a couple of things that you can do. Number one, be an informed consumer. Talk to your vendors, have a very upfront conversation about what your budget's going to be, what you want to accomplish, and hopefully you can pull together, a list of things that are your needs versus your wants. And maybe it's, not springing for, a big giant display here to get another, computer over here. But look at your options. Don't let the upfront costs scare you. Esports is I think it's a bad rap from the outside looking in, because you see this big cost of well, we don't have any computers and I need to spend $50,000 to outfit my space. That barely gets me, what I thought I could get. The good thing about that is you don't have that recurring cost year over year over year. If you outfit a space in year one, yes, there will be a financial commitment. But then we've got computers that should last 3, 4, 5 years, and we don't have to buy them every single year. You might add to your fleet or add different peripherals or other things. Maybe it's furniture in year 2 or something like that, but you don't have these big, large recurring costs every single year. There's no travel typically, or there's very little travel. State championships, conference championships, invitational tournaments do pop up to where you could travel and go and have that in-person LAN experience. But a lot of your regular season is going to happen right from your home facility. When I was at Jamestown, we played 50 games a year and I never left the campus. We had an awesome time, very successful team. And we had zero travel built into our budget, which means we're not paying for buses. We're not paying for bus drivers. We're not paying for meals and overnight stays. A lot of the costs associated with traditional athletics don't show up for esports. So if you can get through that first initial process and that first initial purchase, you're going to be set up for a much smaller operating budget year over year. And the DIY is fundraise. There's a lot of different ways you can budget for esports and fundraise for esports. Some schools are lucky enough to pull it from just a budget. And it could be from student life, athletics, the Department of Underwater Basket Weaving. Not everybody can do that though. So grant writing and fundraising are huge ways that you can go out and look for money. I want to plug the Bytespeed website real quickly. Just bytespeed.com/resources/funding. It's got a list of about 60 or 70 education grants that are STEM related, CTE related, built for schools to use for academic purposes. But again, if we think back to kind of that conversation of a multi-purpose space, there are a lot of grants that schools have used to get academic hardware that works for esports at the end of the day. And then fundraising, things like eTeam sponsor, and I have bake sales and raffles on here as kind of a joke, but also not really. One of my favorite fundraising stories is from a customer of ours in Illinois who, Marvin is the middle school computer science teacher. And in his class, they built an arcade cabinet with a Raspberry Pi. So it was a STEM activity for his students in class work. They built out this arcade cabinet, and at the end of the year, they raffled it off, and they raised a couple $1,000s by doing that fundraiser. And it was something that they did as a team, as his students. It was a curriculum-based project that they were able to use to help fund their esports program. So don't be afraid to get creative and like do, the corny fundraising, 50-50 raffles or bake sales or things like that, because sometimes they can pay off. Sponsorships and partnerships real quickly, I'll touch on because it is a big conversation topic in the world of esports. The one piece of advice that I can give you is that it's a lot easier to go to a local sponsor, local partner, than it is to reach out to a nationwide company or somebody who is not really involved with your school. So the first people that I tell, schools to go and talk to is your booster clubs. They're used to supporting financially with their time, with their resources, traditional athletics, fine arts, school activities for years. Esports is no different. So I would say go and talk to them first and foremost, because they're used to supporting your school and your students. And then ask them for smaller contributions instead of, like I said, that 50 grand to outfit the room. Maybe ask them for $1,000 to cover jerseys this year, or maybe it's $2,000 to sponsor one station where we're going to get the PC, the monitor, the peripherals, all that good stuff. I think you'll find, especially like your local businesses, a lot more apt to doing those types of things than saying, "Yep, put my name on it. Here you go. There's 50 grand. Go build it, and then we'll come." So that's the strategy that I would say works best. And if you want to talk more about that, please feel free to get a hold of me. And then just to wrap up here, because we got about 5 minutes, I've just got a couple pictures of some facilities that Bytespeed has worked with, and one kind of at the end to show you something. So this is the lair. This is the Jamestown facility that we started in. That picture at the very beginning. This is that space with the lights on. It was an old student media center in our school's library, in our college's library, that was not used. This space was completely untouched. And when we started the program, I said, "Can I have that space?" And we moved in the center. You can kind of see this granite tabletop, and then there's a shelf on the back end. That was existing table space that we kept. I did have to learn how to resurface it, which was an interesting experience. So we resurfaced the countertops, we painted the walls, and then we've got some furniture, desks and chairs to kind of fill out the space, and we added to it over time. This is a photo from year 2, where we had, I think, right around 25 computers in the space in total. They have since moved to a different building and are up to like 45 machines or something crazy like that. But the esports program at Jamestown has grown tremendously from when we started back in 2016. But this is our room, and this is my facility that I directly had a hand in building. The other college example that I have is Adrian College up in Michigan. This was a project we did a couple of years ago in partnership with a couple of different vendors, Spectrum Furniture being one of them, to do all those cool desks and chairs. So we've got the Bulldog logo on the chairs, on the desks, the yellow color all over the place. And it was a really cool project to work on. This is in one of their buildings. They kind of renovated this room from a classroom into this really awesome gaming space where their team participates. And it's one of the more cool looking spaces that we've been able to work with. A couple of high schools in Texas and Indiana, Rusk ISD down in Texas. They recently got started just this last year. That's a high school program where they, again, took a computer lab and were able to kind of have the more traditional lab set up that you might see. Same thing with Elkhart High School in Indiana. They also have that kind of same tiered high school look that a lot of people are familiar with. Both of these rooms are still classrooms during the day. They are not dedicated esports facilities like Adrian and Jamestown have. These are high school spaces that are used for class during the day and esports at the end of the day. One more high school program that we worked with, Akron Stem High School in Ohio. This is part of their library that they've renovated a couple of different times. It's kind of a neat picture because it shows, they've got a big screen TV projector board. I think it's a Promethean board actually, but it's on a cart and they bring that in to help with film review. They've got, desks on the wall that line the edge of the library. And they're in there, at a couple of times during the day. And beyond the esports space here in the back behind those glass windows is actually cubicles that Jeff has created for VR use. So it's kind of a really neat space that it's doing a lot of different things. And it's kind of like a maker space also. The STEM high school is awesome and they do a lot of really cool things. And then last but not least, this isn't one that Bytespeed has done. But it's the 100 Thieves Cash App Compound. This is a professional esports organization out in California that spent a ton of money. We're talking millions and millions of dollars to build out an esports facility for their professional team. But if you notice, especially the picture in the top left, it's PCs up against the wall, lining the edge of the room with some couch seating and some chairs. What's the difference between that picture and this one? Not a lot. So if you do it right, and if you're a little creative, there is a way for you to build out an esports facility that looks and feels like we were really intentional and it's on par with some of the top organizations out there, top colleges, top high schools. The professional teams are doing the same thing that you are. And that's pretty cool. So I know it's right at 11 o'clock. I apologize for being super long-winded. However, if anybody's got questions and wants to stick around, I've got some free time. If not, please feel free to get a hold of me afterwards. I'll drop my contact information in the chat here, just so that you guys have it again. Bytespeed.com, and then my cell phone number is this. And then my direct line, if you want to call me at the office, is 218-512-1054. Please feel free to reach out if you have other questions or you want to kind of dive deeper into some of the topics that we talked about today. But I just want to say on behalf of Bytespeed, super thankful that you were all able to join us here today. We are doing the big Lego drawing after the conclusion of webinar number 2. So if you've stuck around to get your chance, the Minecraft Lego set, everybody that joined us today will get entered in another chance to win at the end of webinar number 2, and we'll make that announcement. I think probably at the end of that webinar or on social media, we'll send you an email. But I just want to say thank you again for joining us today. And, really, really appreciate all the support. So that's all I got for you. Can we get a copy of the recording? I want some of my administrators to watch it. Kent, absolutely. So when I am done here today, we're going to upload this to YouTube, and then I'll send an email with the link out to everybody that was in here today. And that's also, I know we had some that weren't able to join live today. We want to make sure that they can watch as well. So you should get an email probably in the next day or two with the YouTube link. So awesome. I don't think I see any other questions. Thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate it. Craig, Tara, thanks again. Tori, thank you. Have a great rest of your week, everyone, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care.